Death in the Office, written by Tom Fowler. It was 8:35 a.m., and Cynthia Peck was not only in a bad mood but late for work as well, which was most unusual for her. Not only was she late, but rain had been coming down in a torrential downpour since 7:13. She knew it was 7, because that is what the digital clock in her automobile reflected as the first thick raindrops splattered her windshield. As she entered the Ames building, she cursed silently that her oversized umbrella had done a poor job of keeping her dry. But today, it was probably good that she was late, for it could have possibly been herself that was found dead on the floor of her spacious office. Are you ready to solve this mystery? Prepare your notes and your team, and be ready to deliberate on whether or not their suspect is guilty. Cynthia Peck was 37 years old and a vice president of the Ames Marketing Company. She did not become a company vice president by being weak or faint-hearted. She knew something was wrong as she exited the 6th floor elevator and met several uniformed police officers waiting for her to arrive. Before the officers had a chance to say anything to her, she asked, "What is going on?" Detective Sergeant Kyle Whitmore answered, "Are you Cynthia Peck?" "Yes," she replied and asked again, "What's going on?" "There is a dead man in your office. Your assistant, Ms. Brewer, found him this morning. Identification in his wallet shows him to be Mr. Trent Willis. Do you know him?" Cynthia showed no emotion as she answered, "Yes, we had a meeting in my office scheduled for this morning. What happened?" "He was murdered," the detective answered, watching Cynthia carefully, and added, "He has a letter opener in his chest. The only belongings we found were his cell phone and briefcase." The detective did not share with her the fact that the state of her office indicated the powerfully built Willis, whose driver's license showed him to be 35 years old, put up a violent but futile struggle with his attacker. Cynthia now felt a slight dizziness. Small beads of perspiration broke out upon her high forehead as she asked without visible emotion, "Who did it?" "We don't know yet," Sergeant Whitmore answered, noticing the wetness on Cynthia's clothing. He pointed towards the end of the hall and said, "Please join us in the conference room after taking a moment to dry off." "Thank you," she gratefully replied. Upon entering the conference room, Cynthia saw that her assistant, Megan Brewer, was already seated along with her boss, Company President Steve Ledbetter, and a member of her marketing team, Josh Kessler. She quickly took a seat and noted that a uniformed policeman stood at the door. Anyone wishing to enter or exit the room would have to do so through the officer. The 4 Ames employees looked expectantly at Sergeant Whitmore. Whitmore silently noted to himself that the Ames employees, with the exception of Steve Ledbetter, appeared to be between 35 to 40 years old and in good physical condition. President Ledbetter was the exception, being 58 years old and at least 50 pounds overweight. He began to speak. "Miss Brewer found the victim at 7:51 this morning. Mr. Willis, as you know, Miss Peck, had an 8:15 appointment to see you. Miss Brewer claims not to know how he got to the 6th floor and into the office. I know that I do not need to tell you that the stairways are locked and a passcode is needed to exit the elevator on the 6th floor. Now, Miss Peck and Miss Brewer are the only persons with a passkey into Miss Peck's office. But Miss Brewer informs us that she left her passkey on her outer office desk for a few moments while in the break room getting a cup of coffee. Security tells us that 4 persons accessed the 6th floor before 7:51. Whitmore stopped for a moment to catch his breath and with a sweeping motion of his hand added, "And those persons are all of you." Before anyone asks, records show Miss Peck exited the elevator at 6:45, a little over an hour before Mr. Trent was discovered. "It's true, Sergeant. Stupidly, I left the signed contract I was to give to Mr. Willis at home. I had to return home and get it." The sergeant looked at Cynthia and said, "Okay, for now. What security shows is that Ms. Peck arrived at, and Ms. Brewer was next at. At 7:25, Mr. Kessler arrived. Mr. Ledbetter was last to arrive at 7:40. Sergeant Whitmore paused and looked at each of them in turn before adding, "It's highly unlikely that somebody hid overnight on the 6th floor. But we're checking security cameras as I speak. What is much more likely is that one of you murdered Trent Willis." Megan felt faint and began to weep. Softly, Sergeant Whitmore said to her, "I'm sorry, Miss Brewer. This is unpleasant but necessary." Steve Ledbetter asked, "Why not check the cameras to see when Mr. Willis entered?" "Because lightning knocked them out early this morning before the rains hit," was the sergeant's reply. Turning to Cynthia, he said, "Let's begin with you, Miss Peck. You first arrived at 6:45. Did you enter your office?" "Yes. It was then that I discovered that I left the contract at home. I left to retrieve it." "Security shows you left the 6th floor at 6:49, Whitmore noted. That's right, Cynthia answered. So it took you an hour and 46 minutes to get back here? Whitmore asked. Right again. The rain hit at 7:13 by my car radio and traffic crawled to a stop. I was in my car the entire time, except for the short time I was in my apartment retrieving the contract. Cynthia thought for a moment as Whitmore's eyes bored into her, and then added, I made several cell phone calls from my car, one of them around 7:10 to the newspaper delivery service, one to my husband's office around 7:35, and another just after 8 to my doctor's office. Telephone company records will show my cell phone to be a long way from here between shortly after leaving until after 8:15 or so. As she said this, she handed Sergeant Whitmore her cell phone. Whitmore thanked her and turned to Cynthia's assistant, Megan Brewer, who had composed herself. He stated, You exited the elevator at 6:59. Did you notice anything out of the ordinary when you arrived? Nothing. I noticed the lightning outside the windows, but that is all. Thinking for a moment, he asked, Did Miss Peck call you at any time after leaving to return home? No, but that is not unusual. She only calls when she needs to. This morning she sent an email before leaving, explaining the situation and asking me to make Mr. Willis comfortable. Whitmore turned to Josh Kessler and asked, What about you? You got here at 7:25. Did you see or hear anything out of the ordinary? No, was his response. Did you make any calls on your cell phone or from the office? Anything that can prove you are not the killer? Nervously, Josh replied, No, nothing. Whitmore thought for a long moment and then asked Steve Ledbetter, Do you have a raincoat? Yes, but I do not have it with me. As president of the company, I have a car and driver at my disposal. Maurice always lets me out right at the front door, so I never wear a coat. Turning back to Josh Kessler. And you, do you have a raincoat? Josh was puzzled but answered, No, but I have an umbrella. If you want to see it, it's drying in my office. Sergeant Whitmore had seen a lot in his 12 years as a homicide investigator, but never anything as bizarre as this. Pointing to the murderer, he said to the officer guarding the door, Arrest this person for second-degree murder. Dear listener, please review, discuss, and sip as the answer is soon to follow. Megan Brewer became pale, and Whitmore was concerned she may faint. Gently, he asked, Why did you do it? Barely audible, she asked, How did you know? I thought with the cameras and monitors out I was safe from discovery. Process of elimination, the detective answered. First, we know Mr. Willis was killed before 7:13 because he had no umbrella or raincoat with him. That places him in the office sometime between 6:45 when Ms. Peck arrived and 7:13 when the rains hit. I know your boss is not the murderer because she is so confident of her cell phone trail she gave me her phone without asking. Mr. Kessler didn't do it because he has a wet umbrella in his office, proving he got here after the rain began at 7:13, which I knew to be true before Ms. Peck told us. Although Mr. Ledbetter has no coat, umbrella, or anything else to prove his innocence, his arrival time was 7:40. Now, in case you are wondering, yes, arrival times can be faked, but it is very doubtful that a man of Mr. Ledbetter's age and physical condition could overpower a younger muscular man. So, it was you, Miss Brewer. I believe Mr. Willis arrived early. You met him at the front of the door and escorted him up. You escorted him into Miss Peck's office. What I don't know is, why did you kill him? Megan felt sick to her stomach and willed herself to stay calm. Softly, she said, Mr. Willis has been in our office several times. I knew he had his eye on me. I was suspicious of his intentions when I found him waiting for me at the door when I arrived. I escorted him into Cindy's office and he tried to attack me. I didn't know what to do. We wrestled around for a few moments. Fortunately, I saw the letter carrier on Cindy's desk and grabbed it. In desperation, I stabbed him in the heart. I didn't mean to kill him, but I panicked after I saw he was dead. Dead silence enveloped the room. Finally, she asked, What will you do with me? Whitmore answered, Well, we have to arrest you, but I would guess your story will check out. I believe the judge will be very lenient with a frightened person who panicked after an act of desperation.